the demon lives on a person's neck. Right here, we never look at the skull from the other side. You know what's on the other side of the skull? The skull, the fig is also there. There's a face. This picture is just from a medical textbook. This is the face. Do you see the face? This is the back side of the skull. It gets even more interesting. If we look at not artistic images, but rather photographs from medical encyclopedias, we get different faces. Metaphorically, this is the flip side of a person, the demon, and purely physiologically, in this area there are the posterior parts, the share of the brain hemispheres. They are responsible for visualization. Everything we see is not the truth. Everyone sees what they see. More precisely, what was shown to him.
Such a charismatic woman? A girl? Look, in general, if we understand the demon as something real, the essence that sits there and really exists and nourishes and influences a person, no. Well, it looks a little different. It's precisely at the level of the essence that sits right at the back of everyone's head. Influencing something? No. Well, there's definitely not 1,000%. But if we perceive this metaphorically, and by the way, based on her shorts, it's not very clear. This is metaphorically, or it's like, yeah, or is it really physiological? She says that they are located there physiologically. These are the parts that are responsible for visualization in the brain. That's just it. She talks about how something is shown there, but who shows it and how it's shown. Again, she doesn't go there. Every person sees the world through their own filters. That's true. You know, it's like when you're watching a movie, for example, the simplest one, right? You're watching a movie, and one person writes a review on saying it's a wonderful film, it's magical, it's so inspiring. And another person says, yeah, well, it's complete nonsense, right? The actors can't act at all. Yeah, the music is terrible. I actually fell asleep halfway through. And the third one writes something else. It seems like we watched the same movie, but the outcome of that viewing is completely different. This applies to everything. It actually applies to, yeah, listen, take me for example right there on YouTube. Someone writes there, it's like we have such a response. Everything is super, everything is great. Someone there, yeah, you're all schizophrenics. Yeah, you really need to get treatment. What kind of ward do you have there? Number, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, and so on. It's perception through different filters, and in that regard, I completely agree with the author of this short. Yes, what are filters really? They have a huge impact on perception of the world. Looking at the world without filters is a huge skill. I would say it's a huge skill. And even experienced esotericists here will 100% understand me that getting rid of all personality filters is probably practically impossible. But the path of the higher self is good precisely because it allows you to get rid of the main filters of personality. Because we are still following the ancient path, transcendence, momentary meditation, and disidentification, and that's exactly what it's about. Until the revelation of that inner goodness, harmony, relaxation, high energies, and vibrations that manifest naturally in the process of disidentification, I turned on my script.
Tell me, who is a demon? I know you told me that in some past lives you were a demon. So please tell us, in the first person, who is a demon?
That's an interesting question. I'll put it this way. Look, since I remembered a bunch of past lives in my life, actually, through the higher self, there really were certain lives in the so-called hellish worlds. I haven't really written about this anywhere. Texts, but I'll say more. In fact, most people have had lives in the so-called hellish worlds. So what does that mean? Hellish worlds? These worlds. And in fact, they were even hellish worlds. Not of this planet. It was a long time ago. It was thousands of lives before this. When I was there on another planet, I won't go into details, so that I'm understood correctly, it was a world hellish, meaning quite dense. There were, well, there I was. I'll put it this way, this world was involved in processing dense, very dense energy, because dense energy that comes from suffering, some kind of tensions. So it's the physics of energy. It flows somewhere. It flowed there like in a sewer. And in this sewer, there were worlds that dealt with cleansing this energy. So look, guys, if this resonates with you, that you've had something similar, it means you've also been in some similar stories in those worlds. It's not exactly a world where horrors happen, no. It's, roughly speaking, a purification station. So all hellish worlds, more or less, are purification stations because fire, in general, is a very cleansing energy. Soon, a video will be released about the fires in California. I'll say this. This fire, I was looking right at it and going right into it. It's very cleansing. The charge itself is very cleansing. So it's that kind of energy, right? No matter how strange it may sound to the mind, it seems like people are losing their homes, losing their lives, among other things. Fire in general cleanses. In fact, cleansing with fire, well, everyone knows various rituals. So, in hellish worlds, there really is no vegetation there. So it's really fire. The beings there are quite dense. You're a bit of an enemy, yeah, like a demon. They're not evil, you know, what they're like. They're very, I would say, quite phlegmatic in many ways. And what's most interesting in that world? This evil, negative, kind of malicious energy, it doesn't even feel evil. And this world itself doesn't even feel bad. It doesn't feel bad, it's just very calm. I just remember that feeling. You're standing, roughly speaking, on this mountain. Yeah, below you. Even that field there is black, and you just feel very, very, very calm. There aren't even any emotions there. What's interesting is that these beings don't have any special emotions, like clear, bright ones. Again, I want to remind you, these are hellish worlds, not this world, but similar worlds. So I think that in this world, there's something similar.
But from the description, it sounds like it's some kind of higher world. So, calmness. Some kind of work is being done for the good, meaning some negativity is being processed. Sounds like it could be pretty good.
I get it. Yeah, it sounds pretty good. But for those who resonated with this story, please write in the comments. Maybe you also remember something similar. Returning to our story, regarding, again, these demons, well, I remember how this energy flowed into this world. I remember the channels it flowed through. Through the channels like a key, as it does for every living being. And this energy didn't flow into those living beings? No. Of course, there are certain, hooks, egregorial ones that pull people in, that draw people out. So about those very sufferings and experiences we've already talked about from in these videos. Well, I can already see the picture that the guys will make for me. They'll attach some horns and write there, in my past life, I was a demon. Yeah, something like that in this case. They're against the backdrop of an erupting volcano. Certainly certain egregorial hooks. In those worlds, they existed. So like egregorial hooks that lead to provocation about these negative emotions. It's also interesting, these beings, these so-called demons, they even, mostly play on the side of a so-called God. Every time I go back to those memories, I get this feeling, especially from the top of those worlds. Again, I wasn't at the very top, but I somehow related to that top. Again, it was so long ago at some level. You're already at a leadership level. You understand you're close to your spirit. This is not an executive level, it's a leadership level. You understand why you're here, and you remember that you were born here on purpose for a specific mission. It's a real choice. Spirit, to be born here in such a world, in such a body, to go through all these things, it's like putting a footstool under someone so they fall. And learn to get up, and at some point, he will notice that footstool and step over it. It was a whole series of lives, It wasn't just one life, but at some point, I just realized that it feels like the time for this kind of game has run out. It's like when you've watched a game, I don't know, some post-apocalyptic one, or a movie, yeah, and it seems like you've understood that that's enough of this topic for now, this setting, like that trendy word, this setting. At this stage, that's enough. This is also, by the way, an interesting topic, that when you incarnate in bad worlds with those kinds of beings, you definitely pick up some super wild karma. You know, I can't say that I've really picked up any karma. It was a direct conscious choice of the spirit, which consciously came there, trying to understand how it feels. A being in such a world and how such worlds are constructed. So I had this experience. I received it. I went through it and moved on into the next hundreds of lives, which were already completely different. In other worlds, by the way, on our planet, I had a very, on the contrary, bright path. So all the lives on our planet, absolutely all of them I remembered. My student told me about it, and then I saw it in detail myself. I saw her partially somehow. Then she told me about it, and later I saw her in even more detail. That was, for example, a life in India. I had many lives on this planet related to teaching, for example, with some spiritual knowledge, with things like that. So, in that life in India, I remember it well. There were many students. By the way, a number of them, for example, returned to me in this life. That's it. There were teaching lives. In South America, there were teaching lives. Somewhere in Asia, and so on. So there were indeed a lot of teaching lives.
But did you also teach about the higher self in connection with the spirit? Or could it have just been some kind of teaching?
Look, what is, again, the connection with the spirit in the way that I present it? It's the path of enlightenment. So it's the path of revealing this inner light of the source and the ray. So it's not that difficult, actually. What is enlightenment? It's the light that shines through the blocks. The little clouds parted a bit, and the darkness, that very light, shone down. In all lives, more or less, it led to this, just in different ways. I didn't call it there with the word higher or anything like that. In Hinduism, there was a bit of its own. In Asia, there was a bit of its own. And in South America, there was a bit of its own. But it all led roughly to that place, into greater purity, into greater depth, into greater wisdom, into greater measure.
Okay. Danila, could you please tell me, do demons exist? Do they actually exist, like we imagine them, those that tempt people and make contracts with them? You know, the kind that are hard to get rid of later? So do they exist, or are they just some kind of distortions?
Yes, they do exist. That's exactly what we were talking about just now, right? In my previous answer. They exist. They operate through certain egregores. Yes, egregores.
Some kind of very pure demon.
Very pure. I, present him with my eyes, my spirit, because this was a long time ago. But again, the top, no matter how strange it may seem, is very close to God. Certain executive guys, well, yes, they operate through egregores. They really try to somehow influence a person to extract energy from them, because they are trying to use that energy. They draw that energy down to themselves over there, into those very worlds. They live off of her, including processing her and also giving some back, some other spaces and dimensions. There you go. So, yes, they exist. And some of them understand that they serve higher powers. Of course, there are fanatics, as I see it. There are fanatics, fanatically inclined, who are like, we're the antithesis. We're kind of a revolution against God. But honestly, they are in the minority. They're in the minority, and that's not a very high level. And those who are direct, actually, at a high level, there is a story about what Satan is. As far as I remember, this is from the word Satan, means obstacle, a kind of barrier. So basically, what is it? It's a force that creates an obstacle. It sets a certain boundary. You overcome it and become what? What do you become stronger than? Notice in all movies, in all culture, how the demon relates to the beings who have overcome his temptations. He respects them. He understands perfectly well that those souls who have gone through his trials, they have walked the right path. That's it. And this may not be understood by those who are not very high, the so-called ranks, but by those who are truly high. They understand this very well.
The video says that every person has this demon as if it's there. Do you agree that every person has their own demon? For everyone, it's like an individual one that knows all their weaknesses, all their individual moments. Some individual moments.
If we, again, understand the demon as a direct entity that just sits inside him, then no. Again, I've already talked about this based on what we see, no. But if we understand a certain, shadow side of a person, that is, it's a combination of all their instincts that are not accepted in this society, ethically, some desires, that are deep inside him. The subconscious is there. They also talk about this so-called reptilian brain, that every person has a reptilian brain, or just an ancient brain. Sometimes they say it like that, ancient brain. So this is the brain around which it will be there. More brains as life goes on. Every person has their, let's say, dark side. It's, really easy to prove this. There are experiments. For example, a woman goes out onto the street and sets up next to her. There's that sign that says, "Do whatever you want with me." And then there are all sorts of paints and other things there. At first, everyone just approaches her. And then they pour paint on her. I don't know. They rip her clothes off or something like that. This essentially starts to kick in. This very ancient brain. In fact, you can actually befriend this part. As I mentioned, you can disidentify from certain blocks, filters you have, and you can befriend this part too. You can accept it. This means that you stop fighting it. You no longer give it your power. You no longer give it your energy. You just live and observe it, and you will see that this part, in fact, if you stop repressing it, if you stop fighting it, it will start to transform. It will begin to slowly sublimate this charge that it has accumulated over the centuries. And over time, you will get not a shadow part, but what is called a processed shadow part. So this is your shadow part that, when accepted and understood, it crumbles like a mirage in the desert, just dispersing in different directions, and you start to see the oasis that was hidden behind that mirage.
Well, I still want to finish this question and ask you, still, these entities, which are probably the entities that people make contracts with, so who are they? If you say that there's no such thing as everyone having a demon or some kind of entity, so who are these fellows?
Certain servants of certain worlds, including the so-called looping worlds.
So these are lower ranks?
Yes. These are certain souls, if it comes to that, who go through their experiences by incarnating in certain comrades, as you call them, in order to tempt, including people. So they exist. These worlds exist. They are located in the astral plane of the Earth. In the so-called lower astral plane of the Earth, well, if we're talking about Earth specifically, certain souls come there to go through specific experiences into her different hierarchies. So there's really nothing that's, as they say, super secret.
The video says that everything we see is untrue, it's an illusion, and that everyone colors their picture in their own way. Do you agree that apparently the world is created by a demon? And what is truth? Perceptions of the surrounding world.
Look, let's take turns. Colors it in their own way, yes, that's true, because again, everyone sees it completely differently. But the idea that the world is created by a demon whispering in a person's ear, no. Well, again, I don't see that. I don't see it from any angle. Is there an objective world behind all this subjectivity? Yes. Letting go of the main stones, the main filters, the main lenses, removing them and touching, for example, the level of the higher self. You can see the world through the higher self. Very similar. We're looking at a specific topic. Take, for example, the topic, I really like the recent one, the quantum world from the perspective of the higher self. Or, what is Lake Baikal from the perspective of the higher self? What is, for example, St. Petersburg, its essence from the position of the higher self? And you will see that. It is one and the same. The same thing, not different, but absolutely the same. And if strong, experienced psychics, without tapping into the higher self, for example, use their techniques to look into the past of St. Petersburg, they will see the same thing. So there is some kind of objective reality, but it's hidden under a huge number of filters that distort perception. under a huge number of them. If you want to become an experienced esoteric, if you want to start seeing the real world and your own true life, that's right. Absolutely. With all these filters, you need to learn how to differentiate. As I already mentioned, you can do this, for example, in my school or in any other one, in whichever you like. So in reality, it's a journey. This journey can be taken in many completely different ways. The main thing is to keep going. The main thing is to keep moving forward, not to give up. And then, over time, that very mirage will fade away. And beneath it will be a beautiful oasis that is truly an oasis, not just some kind of illusion. This particular image, has nothing to do with the objective, the real world.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions. And then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over. I'll be waiting for you.